Hello friends, welcome back to Kiss That Vlog. Today I am showing you one of my favorite items in my collection. This is the book Peter Gabriel by the photographer Armando Gallo. This book was published in 1986, so obviously it came out around the same time as the album, so some of you longtime fans have probably had this in your collection maybe since it came out, but it is one of my newer acquisitions. I bought this book on eBay this year, actually. I bought it this summer in July of 2017, and it cost me only $16 US, including the shipping, which I know it's a really great deal. I feel really lucky and very grateful to have found it for that, because I am now seeing it for a lot more than that whenever I happen to see it online. So I did get a pretty good deal. As for the book itself, it's really excellent. This is full of very high quality pictures by a very talented photographer, and most of the text inside is Peter's own words, because Gallo interviewed Peter extensively for this book. So let's take a closer look. I would say this copy of this book is in very good condition. To be honest, it's almost immaculate, with one exception. Once I opened this up and started to look at it and read it, the pages did separate from the spine back here. I don't know if you can see that. But honestly, this is probably the best case scenario for book damage, if any book damage is going to have to occur. As you can see, the pages are all adhered to each other still, so I won't have to worry about losing individual pages. I feel like when you have a book that sheds individual pages, you pretty much have a lost cause for book repair. This just needs to have this whole section just re-adhered to the spine, which is no biggie, I don't think. So we'll take a little walk through this book. Armando Gallo talks about how he first met Peter Gabriel in 1971 when Gallo was just starting out as a photojournalist, and he says that Genesis was the first band that he ever photographed live. There's a real brief biography of Peter, just this one page. It's just the basics, nothing that I didn't already know, but that's fine because this book isn't meant to be a biography. So we have some photos from the Genesis era. There's a couple paragraphs of Peter talking about sort of the concept of wearing masks. More Genesis. This is one of my favorite pages in this book. I love seeing Peter with his young family. I've seen this one online, but this is kind of a better copy. I adore Anna and Melanie Gabriel. They were so gorgeous as little girls. They're so cute, and they are still beautiful ladies. I just love them. This photo down here is just insanely cute. He has Melanie on his lap, Anna off to the side, and they are playing, wearing the old Genesis masks. It's so cute. On these pages, he talks about the meaning behind Salisbury Hill, the process behind writing Here Comes the Flood. There's a little bit about what it's like to work with Bob Ezrin. This is pretty interesting. These were his very first concerts as a solo artist, and the author notes the juxtaposition between, you know, how maybe his audience would have expected him to come out looking. They might have thought he was going to be like how he was in Genesis, all kind of outrageous and in costume, and here he comes out in this gray tracksuit. So always the unexpected from Peter. On this page, Peter talks about success. There's a quote from him where he says, "The thing I enjoy most about success is the independence it has given me. I have used the money I have earned to build up a studio, which means I can always make the music that I want to make. rather than being forced into compromising the music to please the record company to get the bills paid, which I have seen happen to many musicians. In this paragraph up here, he was talking about kind of going with his intuition, and he talks a little bit about struggling with indecisiveness, which I really relate to. On this page, he was talking about dreams, and I think you'll find some of this familiar because it parallels the lyric in Mercy Street. He says, "When I look around me, I see buildings, cars, all types of artifacts which were once only dreams or ideas inside their designers' heads." Sounds familiar. There's the Genesis reunion where they helped pay off the debts from WOMAD. Some really gorgeous pictures. Sorry if you just heard that weird sound. My cat is doing some strange things. There's really cool behind the scenes photos here from a concert before they went on stage. They're stretching and just kind of goofing around. You can see Tony, you can see David Rhodes. Tony has a face on the back of his head for some reason. Very cool. This was prior to a concert in New York City in 1982. Very cool. Some really stunning photos. There are some really interesting thoughts from him here about the concept of talent. Still today, there are different schools of thought about whether highly talented people are born or made. And here we find out that Peter is of the camp who believes talent is not inborn, but mostly learned. He says in here, "I believe talent is overvalued." And he goes on to say, "I have always taken the view that if I could go up to anyone in the street and tell them that I would kill them in 12 months' time unless they produced a great work of art, if they took me seriously, they would probably find talent, which they hadn't previously known existed." On a lighter note, he is asked, "What is your natural high?" And his response is about 6.5 inches, weather permitting. Oh, Peter. They have all sorts of topics that they asked him about. He talks about world music, vegetarianism, religion, anger. Here is Peter with Armando Gallo. And apparently, I've seen this picture before, but apparently this is Armando's cat. There's a funny story over here. You have to have the background information about Peter Gabriel didn't really like to do any drugs. There's an anecdote from the 70s, which I've heard in several different places, so I know it's true because I've read it over and over again, where either, I can't remember if it was supposed to be during Genesis or during the beginnings of his solo career. I think it's the latter. So in the 70s, at some point, he went ahead and he tried some, I think it said he ate 2 hash cookies, and they gave him such a terrible trip. Like, he said he was laying on the floor hallucinating for hours, and he hated it, so he didn't do drugs anymore after that. And so this story behind this picture is that Armando Gallo threw like a dinner party at his house, and then after dinner, the other guests like rolled this joint of some really, I can't remember what it was called, but it's supposedly like this really potent strain of weed. And so Armando said that at that point Peter Gabriel just like politely left, and he went in and helped Armando's girlfriend do the dishes. I love it. Some more really amazing shots. There's a whole bunch of Peter talking about video and music videos, of course, a huge thing for him. He talks about how rock music is what he calls an uncomfortable marriage of art and business. He talks a little bit about management. He talks about Gail Coulson for a little while. She was his manager, as most of you guys probably know, for quite a while. I think like 20 years, right? I don't have all this stuff memorized right now, but there's a nice little paragraph about Gail. And he says, "I'm aware that having a woman as a manager is unusual. Sometimes Gail has a hard time, but she can also be quite tough when she needs to be. There are many areas of the business where men still have a stronghold, but there is no good reason for it." He also talks about the difference between the music industry in the US and in Europe, which is pretty interesting. There's a page here where he talks about technology and music, which obviously is a huge element of Peter Gabriel. He's always been innovative that way, and it's pretty interesting. He was talking about using technology and synthesizers, and he says, "As equipment gets cheaper, many more people will have access to it. I hope it will have the effect of encouraging many more people to play music and destroy the barrier between those who can play and those who can't. The Fairlight costs almost the price of a house, but I think its capabilities will be available for the price of a bicycle, or at least there will be a home computer which does a lot of things that a Fairlight does." So the Fairlight, I know that was like his keyboard synthesizer thing. Obviously I'm not a musician, I don't know exactly, but I was going to ask you guys who are if you feel like this has become true. I know that it's become a lot easier and cheaper for people to have their own home recording studios. Do you guys think that it's affordable? I don't know anybody who does that stuff, so I was just wondering how accurate his predictions were about it being accessible. So if you have any insight on that, feel free to drop me a comment. I really love this page, even though each of the little blurbs are just tiny little paragraphs, but I have a lot of respect for the musicians that he works with, and especially the people that have been with him for a long time, David and Tony particularly. So I really like that there are little areas here where he talks about them. He has a paragraph about David Rhodes, a paragraph about Tony. So this page is pretty cool. I'm not, like I said before, I'm not a musician, so I don't really know anything about this stuff, but there is a list of all of his gear. It has the name of what mixing console he uses, tape machines, all this other stuff, even like what microphone he uses. So if you are somebody that knows what any of this stuff is, it's pretty sweet. There's all sorts of talk in here. He has opinions about politics, the political situation in the United States, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, a whole bunch of other stuff. Very cool to have his insight on other things besides music. Here he talks about African music and its influence, the anti-nuclear campaigns, having the opportunity to do side projects, more stuff about technology, working with producers, and specifically there's stuff about working with Daniel Lanois, and then there's the soundtrack for Birdie, which he had recently composed at the time of this book coming out, because that was in '85. And after that, they talk pretty extensively about So, because of course it was new at the time of this book coming out. You'll notice here, how do you react to the criticism that you take too long to record an album? Your last studio album was back in '82. Oh my gosh, 5 years between new albums. Oh, the horror. But anyway, there's stuff about like every song on So. They talk a little bit about like, either what it was inspired by or whatever. And then there are a lot of photos from behind the scenes on the making of the Sledgehammer video, which is very cool. If there's any young people out there that are even younger than me, you can see here those clouds rolling across his face were not CGI. They were painted on, wiped off and repainted and wiped off, and so on to make them advance across his face one frame at a time. This whole video was a painstaking and often painful process. It's still deeply impressive even today. And frankly, I don't think most artists nowadays would bother putting this kind of blood, sweat, and tears into a music video just for the sake of art and innovation. We have some more concert pictures. Let's see, he's wearing that blue shirt, so I think this is Amnesty. Oh yeah, it shows on that banner, Amnesty International. There's some more from that. There's Jill. This must be real close to the end of their marriage. She looks really pretty. And there's a discography up to that point anyway. So my final thoughts would be that this honestly would be an incredible book just on the merit of the photographs alone. But having all of that interview content just takes it to the next level. I love reading interviews with Peter. I respect his opinions so much. He's so insightful, and his point of view, his mindset, it always just seems to click with how I see the world too. And I feel like I learn new things from him all the time. If you don't have a copy of this yet, I totally recommend it. I don't necessarily recommend spending an arm and a leg, because if I managed to find a great deal, then you could too. But I would definitely say this book is a real treasure. So I would just say use your own judgment as far as cost goes. It is kind of rare, I think. Or at least I don't see it all that often out there. That's all for now. If you haven't already subscribed to Kiss That Vlog, please hit that red subscribe button, and then you'll always be notified when we have a new video out. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.